Hello, everyone. Look at us. Late, live. Love it. Unexpected live. I told folks at the end of the live show we might have a special live Q&A guest. Here's the deal. Initiative 2081 is under attack. An initiative a lot of you supported, signed, fought hard for. That's the parental notification initiative. Brian Heywood with Let's Go Washington is the backer of that initiative. So he's joining us now. He's going to take some questions from all of you. I'll kind of go through, I guess, what happened. And we'll set this up for those of you who missed it on the live show earlier this week. And we'll just go through what do we do? And then maybe some questions and stuff like that. So Initiative 2181 was passed by legislative leaders at the end of last session. It was an initiative sent to them. How many signatures did it get, Brian?
420,000.
420,000 Washingtonians signed it. Said, yeah, we are the stakeholders in our children's lives, and so we should know what's happening with them at school. And so that got sent to the legislature. The legislature, I think, felt compelled to have to pass it. They passed it almost unanimously. And there was a hint, though, and I'll play these cuts. There was a hint at the end of last session that they were passing it, but that they were going to come back and fix it, in their words. So here is Senator Jamie Peterson, who's now the Senate Majority Leader, saying when they passed this into law last session that he had some concern about some of the language.
As a lawyer, I've been anxious for the last few months about some language that is ambiguous in the initiative. Some language that potentially calls into question a lot of other statutes that we have passed, protecting the agency and autonomy of young people, particularly our teenagers, as they go through middle school and high school, to make their own health care decisions and to make other decisions about themselves. So as I went into the hearing process last week, Mr. President, I went with a lot of questions, and I'm happy to report that those questions have been answered now to my satisfaction both by nonpartisan staff, understanding the initiative, understanding that it very clearly does not affect any of those rights to make healthcare decisions, to get mental health care for our young people. I also was comforted to hear from the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction and from school directors that they plan to implement the initiative narrowly and consistently with the other law that we have passed over time, protecting the rights of young people. And as the gentlelady from the 30th District said, I think we'll be watching very carefully to make sure that how this rolls out on the ground in our 295 school districts is consistent with that understanding.
Yeah, so Brian, when you heard that at the end of last session, so you have these huge 3 big victories last year. They feel compelled, I think we both think there were political motivations, to pass the police pursuit fix into law, the no state income tax into law, and parental rights into law. But when you heard, a couple, and it was him and Claire Wilson, saying, well, we hope this is narrowly implemented. Did you expect them so quickly to come back and say, hey, we're going to throw parts of this out the window?
I guess I was hoping that they wouldn't, but actually I'm not surprised that they did, because I think they've taken this stance that we don't really care what the voters do. And I think that he was signaling, if you listen to what Senator Peterson's saying, he's sort of signaling to people, he's got a wink wink to people. Yeah. I'm going to vote for this wink wink, but I'm going to make sure, and we'll, my concerns have been quieted, so I can therefore in good conscience vote for it.
Yeah.
However, wink wink,
yeah,
we're going to do stuff, right?
Well, what I find fascinating about this, so we'll throw this up right now. So what happened is, beginning of the session, Senator Jamie Peterson introduced Senate Bill 5181. And this year. So, and it upends. It literally, if you go through this, they've crossed out like half the law. And they replace it with some other language that's like a little more vague, but it's very clear that they do not believe parents have a right to know what's happening medically with their kids. So last year, they vote for this thing. They voted into law. So are they telling me that they voted for a bill that they thought was against the law? They voted for a bill that they thought violated kids' federal privacy rights? Well, then why'd you vote for it?
Absolutely, I think that's what they're saying, and that they're playing this game, and I think they thought we can do this in the shadows. There won't be as much focus next year.
Yeah.
And if you're playing a long game, it doesn't matter if you're doing this destruction. you're playing the long game. Well, okay, we'll get 50% of it this year, but then we'll get 50% of it next year. And if this sets us back 80%, then next year we'll get 70% of it, right? And the thing I think they're missing though is, and they didn't mess with this, and I don't want to see them come and change it, but the very first part of it, we put the language in that the legislature finds that parents are the primary stakeholders in their children's upbringing.
That's your language.
That's our language. And it's in the bill, and it's in this bill. It was in the original initiative, and it's in this bill. And it's never been in RCW. It's never been in Washington law before. And that seems like a small thing, but I believe that it is a really important legal foundational block for someone to begin to build a case if you feel like the state has sort of gone too far and intruded on your rights as a parent.
Yeah. And just a reminder, so we jumped on a live. You can put some questions in the chat. You can put questions on X, Patreon, Locals, Facebook. Brian Heywood is here. They're trying to undo the Parental Bill of Rights initiative. I mean, I see it as an attack. First of all, it's completely disingenuous. You passed it last year to avoid electoral consequences. Now they're coming back and they're upending some of the language. So if you have any questions, Brian's going to be taking them here in a moment. To me, this was always the plan. I mean, I think that what they were scared of, and you've talked about this a lot, is these three initiatives and the Parental Rights Initiative ending up on the ballot.
Right.
So they just said, you know what, just pass them via the legislature. They won't be on the ballot where we think they'll be very popular and hard for us to defeat. And then we'll come back and we'll just screw with them next year. Is there any doubt in your mind that that was always the plan?
No, but I'll add one more dynamic that I believe is true. I don't know this for sure, but the more I look and watch sort of what they're doing, there seems to be a split between the ultra progressives and what we call the more traditional liberal Democrats.
Yeah.
The traditional liberal Democrats, I think, are more open to reason as parents, and the progressives are willing to push things way past the point of common sense for everybody.
Yeah.
And so if someone is a liberal Democrat in the legislature, and quite frankly now that's where the battle is, it's between these two groups because they've got total control. The worry is that you're going to get smacked if you don't support the progressive thing, because they'll go out and really aggressively make your life miserable, yelling, screaming, go to your business, whatever. And so I think that part of this was, let's placate the progressives with a wink, wink. We got it. We know what our marching orders are, but we'll do it in this more sneaky way.
Yeah, 100%. So is there any recourse to this? Because, I mean, if you go and could you run another initiative on an initiative? I mean, what is the recourse if they this year, because you have their bill here.
Right.
And I mean, it's line by line through, like, they don't think you have a right to know if your child is being prescribed medication at school. They don't think you have a right to know if your child has mental health issues they're being treated for at school. They don't think you have a right to know if your kid has like gender dysphoria and is going by school and identifying as a different name entirely. So if they go through and they do this to a law that was passed via voter initiative, what's the recourse for that?
I think there's a couple of things. Number one is, like I said before, there is built into this law the foundational principle that parents are the primary stakeholders. And so I think a parent, number one, could use the law currently, even if they change it, but they could use this as a foundational place to go and sue and say, you can't say that we're the primary stakeholder when you're keeping significant information from me as a parent.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the first thing.
You need a parent to be willing to sue.
Yes.
You gotta find
and
one of those.
there will be,
Yeah.
right? I mean, people are leaving but there'll be something that's egregious enough that someone will say, wait a minute, right? And number two, you can do another initiative if you wanted to. You could.
Yeah.
Anybody
He's
could,
like,
right?
not me.
No, that's something else we could do, is we could go back and reemphasize it and say, no, we really meant it, right?
Yeah.
One of the problems with that is it's easy for the legislature to fight this because they use your tax money to fight you. We have to go out and get private money and gather it and do it again.
It's not right.
So it's sort of an unfair fight, but it's certainly an option. And I think that's one of the uses, the best uses of the initiative process is to push back against stupid overreach.
Yeah.
Not to create laws in and of themselves. That really was
Yeah.
never my intent. It was to push back when they've really overreached.
So the obvious thing is we need to defeat the bill, right?
Yes.
So let's start.
That's the
Let's
cheapest
start
and
there,
most
right?
effective.
And for those of
Right.
you just joining our live chat, no, this wasn't planned. People are like, was this planned? Should I have known about this? No, we're winging it. We had Brian scheduled, and I thought, let's just go on live so people can ask questions of you if they want. So we're talking about this attack on the Parental Bill of Rights initiative less than a year after it was signed into law.
Right.
So let's start with what the easiest thing would be. The easiest thing would be to shame them so much and have parents speak out about this that they decide that they're not going to fix the parental rights initiative, that they're not going to pursue this. So what can we do? What can people do?
So the very first thing is to comment on the bill itself.
Yeah.
It's ideal to comment it before it sort of gets its hearing, but even now you still can go and make comments. And so that's going to, if you go to the legislative session, you can find your own, and I'm sure you guys have the link, and I've got it also on my Twitter page, and you can go and find your own legislator, and you can look in at the bill itself, and you have to sign in and then make comments pro or con.
Yep.
And they track the number of comments pro and con for each of the bills. And things that nobody really matters may have 100 comments or less. Last year, we had some things where we had 8,000, 9,000 people making comments. I think if you get 10, 20, 30,000 people that comment on this, it catches their attention because they realize, this thing has got fire under it.
Yeah.
So that's probably the most effective thing you can do immediately right now.
Yeah.
Is get involved, and not just you. You need to share this, like with your friends and cousins and family and church members. You can't just sit back and expect that the government is going to go in a way that you like if this is something that matters to you.
Well, and we know it matters to a lot of people. I mean, it mattered to the point where you got almost 500,000 signatures. So if you're one of those people who signed the parental rights initiative because you believed in it, well, it's under attack. And
That's right.
I think we all knew that the initiative fight based on what happens in the state normally, like it doesn't end when you get the signatures. It doesn't end when it becomes law. I mean, look at the gas ban bill.
They're suing.
I mean, they're
not
suing
enforcing.
over it. And so it's always this thing where people have to fight even after they voted on something.
Right.
And even after it's law, you have to fight to keep it. So anyone who was involved in supporting the initiatives, now the fight on the parental rights initiative continues. Matt Gilbert asked a question, and he has a good point. You know, Kruse already came out, the head of superintendent of public instruction, and he said, yeah, I think that there's aspects of this that violate federal law, so I'm not going to enforce it. As if he should be the arbitrator of what laws he's able to enforce or not. He should be sued over that, just specifically. But he already said, right as the bill became law, that he believed notifying parents of medical stuff that their kids were dealing with at school violated their federal privacy as students. So essentially what Matt says is, why does it matter since Kruse doesn't care to enforce the law to begin with? So if Kruse is not even enforcing these aspects anyway, why do we care, I guess, if they just codify it?
I think because every school district has its own school board and its own, and you can dramatically impact the policies. Even if Kruse says, this is what you should do, the school board doesn't have to do everything that he says.
Right.
They can ignore it. They can do their own enforcement. And I think that we should go after Kruse as well.
Mm-hmm.
I believe this law in Texas or in Florida is not necessary, and they're not breaking federal law.
Right.
So what he's saying is, first of all, false.
Well, that's interesting. Wait. That's interesting. So in Texas and Florida, they're not hiding stuff from parents.
No way.
They're not prescribing medication to kids at school, and they're clearly not violating federal law.
Correct.
So why would it be violating federal law here?
Because he's lying. Right?
That's a good point, Brian. Because he's lying.
Yes. Yeah, he's not being truthful in it. I think there's another issue, too, that's sort of parallel to this, and this might be another way that people end up fighting.
Yeah.
If you take your child into a doctor, and they're 13 or 14, which is where they've moved that sort of mature minor doctrine age down to, and they say, we're going to do a battery of tests on your child. And you say, okay, what's the battery of tests? They will say to you, sorry, I can't tell you unless your child agrees to disclose this. And if your child says, no, I won't disclose it, they'll either not do the test because you take your child and leave, and then you'll get reported to Child Protective Services, right? Or they're going to do the test, and then when the results come back, they won't tell you the results, and then you'll get a bill from the insurance company.
Yep.
And I think this is a piece that is, well, it leads to potentially insurance fraud, and it makes the state and the hospitals complicit with this insurance fraud.
Well, it makes no sense either.
None. But
Yeah.
we shouldn't even be having this conversation if
Yeah.
it's just about common sense, right?
Yeah.
Because who says that the parents shouldn't be involved? But I think there's these ancillary problems, including the insurance one. And this one is huge because people will get bills for things and the doctors won't tell them and they have to pay.
Right.
It's not like the kid has to pay. It's not, the state's not saying, oh, hey, if the parent's not the primary person in charge, then who is? And if it's the state, then you should have to pay for stuff that I don't get to know about.
Right. If the state is making it so that parents are cut out of that decision making. And some people say this is hyperbolic, but let me just give you an example of like worst case scenario, right? Because something you were referring to there, we have a mature minor doctrine. So, I mean, in large part, if a child is 13 and over, there are a lot of medical decisions in our state that they can make without parents knowing anything about it, period.
Right.
Now, there are some more significant medical decisions that you do need parental consent for. For instance, there's some misinformation
Aspirin.
out there.
Having an aspirin.
There's some misinformation out there that you can get gender reassignment surgery without parental consent. No, however, we have something called the mature minor doctrine, where all you need, you can be a 15-year-old, all you need is a doctor who's willing to say and W a mature minor. And then parental consent goes out the window.
Right.
So you could actually have a situation where you have, and we know this happens all the time, watch our documentary Operation Indoctrination, where you have a kid, they're surrounded by sort of hello this everyone, look at LGBTQ us, late, culture. live, Nicole,
Oh,
I
I
hear
hear
something on the
unexpected
computer
live.
there.
I
Hold
told
on. Folks at the end of the live show we might have a... Is that just a computer? I don't know. Something went on. We talk all the time about how they have this LGBTQ kind of environment that's going on, and they almost like encourage kids to be LGBTQ, right? So you could have a kid, you send them to school, like fourth grader or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden their teacher's telling them how awesome it is to be transgender, and then that kid is now going by a different identity at school. You could actually have a situation where teachers know, but parents don't know,
Yes.
that a kid is going to go to a gender clinic, start hormone therapy, maybe get dubbed a mature minor, and then get surgery, and then come home one day and they got surgery and the parents never knew about it.
And even this bill, we were careful because I know this is a sensitive issue. We're trying to find a way that would protect parents and not harm kids or not put them in a dangerous position. And it was notification, not permission even,
Yeah.
right? And I think personally as a parent, I think permission is something that should be required. And this goes to something that's, I think, really important in the assumption. The legislature is making the assumption that the vast majority of parents will do harm to their children.
Yeah.
Right? And because that's why they're saying this law it's not exceptional cases. The current law says if there is abuse in the home or the threat of abuse, you don't have to tell parents.
Yep.
And I'm okay with that, right?
Right.
I get parent abuse happens.
Totally
But-
different situation.
But when you make the basic fundamental idea of the law that we can't tell any parents, we have to keep this secret because we're going to assume that the parents will be abusive in this case.
Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty radical societal decision that you've made. And I think its consequences are enormously negative on society.
Yeah, as you've often said, you are saying the government knows better than a parent.
Absolutely.
The government can navigate a child's mental health crisis better than their parent. That's insane. And it's also like, you think you're going to put the child in a better mental health state
Right.
by cutting them out so their parents at home.
And telling them to keep secrets from their
Right,
parents.
keep secrets from the parents. I got a good question. I actually don't know the answer to this. Maybe you do. I hope you do, because you wrote it was your initiative. Janelle Villegas on YouTube says, I'd like to ask, I'm an independent homeschooling parent. How does this law apply to me, or what could affect me or my children? Does the Parental Bill of Rights, the notification law, really affect a parent who's homeschooling already?
Not so much.
Not so much.
It was primarily for kids in public schools. There's a few
Yeah.
pieces of it that could. The schools can't just come in and do something. So because you're a homeschool,
Yeah.
you control everything, right?
Yeah.
So that's sort of the big risk. This was really looking at the public schools have no right to come in and take the role of parents
Yeah.
from parents. That was the primary aim of this.
Yeah, I think what's so frustrating to me is the big screaming example of why the parental notification initiative was needed in the first place is this sort of government medicalization of kids like via the schools and hiding that from parents, and
Right.
mental health issues and hiding it from parents. I think, and you can disagree with me, that that's what drove a lot of parents to sign this.
Yes.
Yeah. And now that's the part that they want to take away with this Senate bill. And a reminder of the Senate bill number that we're talking about.
5181.
5181, Senate Bill 5181.
The one thing I would add, though, is that if you are a homeschool mom, the place you still will be impacted is the state has, separate from this, with a separate law, this medical records if you go to a hospital, that still is in place. They do not have to tell you what tests they're giving your kid.
Yeah.
And generally in homeschool, you've got a lot better relationship anywhere between parents, and the
Yeah.
kids aren't going to keep it a secret or whatever. But they don't have to tell you, and the insurance company doesn't have to tell you, right? But you have to pay for it. So I think that's still an issue. And our thought was this first phase, the parents are the primary stakeholders, gives you rights to even go and fight that.
Yeah.
I would see someone could use that as a basis for a lawsuit that says, you can't give medication or do a bunch of tests and take the results and not give them to me, especially if I'm having to pay for it. Right?
Yeah,
But-
if you're just popping into the live stream, Brian Heywood of Let's Go Washington, we had scheduled a sit-down interview, and I thought, let's just do it live because we're dealing with this issue of one of the initiatives passed into law by the legislature, the Parental Notification Initiative, which says schools can't hide crap from you if you're the parent.
Right.
They are now turning around, and one of the first things they're doing this legislative session is they're literally going through the bill, and they're crossing things out that they don't like from it, which they have the right, not the right, I think that's a right they shouldn't be using, but the law gives them the ability to
Right,
do this.
right.
The question is, should they be doing it? I would say that it's a slap in the face
Completely.
to the initiative process, to democracy. I mean, I thought they were the party of protecting democracy. Right. It's a big middle finger to voters, frankly. So Brian's here talking about what do we do from here, really what's at stake. I got this question in the chat from Laura M. She says, please tell me which school is providing a child with a prescription at school. This happens all the time. In fact, in the Seattle School District, they open these sort of school-based clinics. I had this dad on, Laura, I'll have to, it was a year and a half, 2 years ago now, where he was horrified to find out like his child had a prescription bottle. And imagine being a dad, and I think his child was like, 13 maybe. He's like, what is this? Where did you get this? And, it was through the school counselor, essentially, that this child was able to get connected and get this medication. So law allows it to happen. I mean, that's part of what we're fighting back against. Brian,
and that's so when I went and talked with the Seattle Times Ed Board, and their whole attack on this was, that never happens. You're just scaremongering. This never happens.
It literally does.
And I think one of the things that might also be valuable is to begin to gather people that have had this happen.
Yeah.
And speak loud enough, because there's a sort of some of them are afraid to come forward because they're afraid of further retaliation in the school.
Yeah.
There's sort of a threat. There's a threat to parents if you're not protecting, like the school knows best.
Yeah.
And so collecting the voices of people who have actually experienced this is probably a valuable step also, right? So that you've got, when you hear it and you go, oh my gosh, that actually happened.
Yeah.
And it's sort of shocking in how brave some of the school systems have been.
Well, you make a good point, because I think that's a common retort. We actually heard it in some congressional testimony yesterday that, this stuff doesn't happen. It's a culture war, wedge issue. This stuff doesn't happen. For instance, Republicans in Congress, one of the first things they voted on is to ban biological boys from participating against girls or men against women. And Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of our state, put out this video basically saying this is so rare, right? And it's like, well, I can give you 3 examples just in Washington of like the Junior Olympics track meet, state track meet. It's not so rare. And even if it is it still, isn't it important, right?
If it's your kid,
right?
It doesn't matter whether it's rare and it only happens 1 out of 100 kids if it's your kid.
Well, and also, to the point that you brought up, collecting these stories and having them at the ready to say, when the obvious retort happens that, oh no, we're not, it's very rare that a child is going through like a gender dysphoria and we're hiding it from parents. Okay, well then you have a retort to say, it's not rare, it happened here, here, here. Again, I keep going back to our documentary, Operation Indoctrination. Literally it was 4th grade, right? I know it was a 10-year-old, is that 4th grade roughly? In an elementary school in Olympia, biological girl decided at school wanted to go by a boy's name, be a biological boy. Parents were immigrants from India.
Right.
This was all hidden. The teacher was in private communications with his student saying, delete these emails or your parents will find out. And the parents were so horrified by it when they found out. They literally moved back to India. Imagine that. Imagine coming to America for a better life, and you find out that your child has been, all this that's happening at school, gender dysphoria, kept from you as a parent, and you're so disgusted by it, you move back to India. And that's just one example of many that we hear from parents. More broadly speaking, so as we're trying to figure out what do we do about this attack on the Parental Rights Initiative, I get this question a lot. Brian Manzo put this in Patreon. Is there any chance of putting the initiatives that failed in November back on the ballot again? He says the ballot language was intentionally misleading. Maybe enough people know that now where it would pass a second time around. Are you considering putting the 3 that did not pass in November, which was repeal of long-term care, repeal of capital gains, and repeal of Climate Commitment Act? Is there still life for those initiatives?
There could be. There could be.
Okay.
So one of the things we went back to, and this sort of shifts the discussion a little bit, but we were outfunded like 8-1 in the actual campaign
They
itself.
spent so much money
44.
defeating those.
In fact, I think one number I saw was close to, they passed the money around, so it's hard to track, but it was between $40 and $50 million. So one of the things I think we need to do is to better understand, well, where's that money coming from? And I broke it down into 3 big places where there's huge chunks of money.
Yeah.
Unions were half of that money.
Of course.
Right? And it's largely unchecked, and they can do, multiple groups can split up and give pieces, and then the national can give, there's...
Yeah, but union money good.
Right,
Business money
right.
bad.
But even, and then, well, there was a second place, which was we watched the polling on long-term care. They knew that they had a problem because it was not popular. When people understand it, it's not popular. So the state began spending your taxpayer dollars as early as like late July and early August, extolling what a great program this was, how you should use it, and if this is going to save grandma.
They had commercials.
And they had commercials paid for by the state that they don't have to report as part of the PDC reporting. So the state is able to spend money on some of these issues, so you're competing against that. And then you had, let's bring our friend Reuven Carlyle into this.
Yeah.
He was working he's a director, and we don't know because there's no disclosure on it.
This former state senator Reuven Carlyle, who's one of the architects of
He was
the
an
CCA.
architect of this, and he worked for a group called Clean and Prosperous America. Clean and Prosperous put in $2 or $3 million into the No campaign, and we could see it, but it was when it came in was late, and a lot of this stuff came in at the very end, right? And then miraculously, Clean and Prosperous they've received about $40 million in grants from the CCA. So that's a great investment, right? I give $2 million and I get $4 million back. That's fantastic. So you've got, I think there's a disclosure piece as well as I don't believe that the cities were lobbying as well, right? The cities all got millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. So the cities would lobby, they would pay lobbyists to go lobby for their city to get some of this money from the CCA and from some of the other projects as well. So cities are able to spend money, the state spends money, the unions have enormous amount of money, and then all the NGOs are out there. And the NGOs, like I just started digging into this, but you throw a fishing pole into the water and with one of the legislators, Democrat legislators primarily, and you'll find that they are on the board or a company that is getting money from the state. Yeah. And so there's this real turbulent sort of grift, I guess, that's going on.
100%. As much as they use the word grift for the right, you look at this, and if you're actually trying to look at it reasonably, because again, God forbid, like Amazon donates money to a candidate. Oh my God, big business and corporations are buying elections. You could have 5 times the amount of money spent by unions. And that's okay. You know, all these companies that are profiting from the CCA donating money to defeat the initiative to repeal it, and none of the media. It's like the media genuinely doesn't care. And it's if it were happening on the conservative side, it would be like, oh my God, like right-wing grifting, like payola, plugola.
Pillow guy. Right.
Oh my God, it's insane. Woke Woodman says, how does this not violate the civil rights of parents? Well, the Constitution does not mention privacy or the right to privacy. It is inherent in the Bill of Rights. The issue is minors are incompetent before the law. So does that not lead to parental rights? So could this be considered a civil rights violation for parents.
Well, I think part of the problem is that in the 1990s, in Washington law, they implemented this mature minor doctrine.
Yeah.
Right. And so I certainly believe that it's an infraction of the rights of parents. But that's, again, why I'm going back to this one phrase at the very beginning that says parents are the primary stakeholders. And the legislature finds that parents are the primary stakeholders. Once you have that in law, that begins to be your basis for fighting back against this overreach. And the reason this is important is that this didn't, like, the laws that got passed last year and the year before didn't just happen out of nothing.
Right.
This is a 20-year process, almost 30-year process, with this doctrine of mature minor doctrine. Originally, it was designed with children much older, so 16, 17, and it was primarily for young women that were 16 or 17 to be able to get an abortion without getting their parents' permission, right? And this happened in California. And again, the assumption was that all dads are bad and that the dads were probably the rapist and you can't tell the dad. And I mean, there was this horrible doctrine that was behind it, the assumptions that were behind it. But once you set that in motion, then the things that you could do and the age with which it could be assented to by youth was gradually lowered, 15, 14, 13, 12. 11 now, even for some medical things. That was a 20-year process that just happened over time, and we didn't fight it. No, there was no one there going, stop, this is where this is going. So it became law, and I don't know that it's, maybe you could fight it on some legal ground, but it's part of Washington state law.
But if your child hasn't been deemed a mature minor, then you should have full say in what's happening with them. You know what I mean? I mean, you should, and it's just, the mature minor thing is it's clearly being abused from its original intent.
Yeah, it was like in California when they decided to legalize medical marijuana, right? Suddenly every element you had was a medical, like the doctors that were prescribing it, like, sounds like a medical emergency to me. And they were like, right? So it was sort of a joke. You put it in there to
not
narrow
relaxing
it.
enough?
That sounds like a medical issue. And I don't have any, you can do whatever you want with marijuana, but I'm just using that as you set these parameters. And I think you'll find if it's up to the doctor's discretion, then you doctor shop.
Yeah.
Right? And
Oh, 100%. And you find a doctor who's like very ideologically to the left, and you get that doctor, you say, hey, my parents won't let me get such and such, hormones, whatever it is. And the doctor says, okay, you're a mature minor. That's all it takes. That is literally all it takes under the law. And then a child as young as 14 or 15 can make virtually any medical decision on their own. And for a parent, that's, again, you said it, and we've talked about this before. They build these laws with the worst intentions in mind. Right. They assign the worst intentions to every parent as if no parent could possibly navigate a situation where their child believes they're a different gender other than the one they were born. Only the government can do that.
Right.
And that's the problem. Stephanie says, can you give us the bill number again? Yes, Senate Bill 5181 is the bill that Democrats have introduced to unravel the parental rights initiative that almost 500,000 Washingtonians signed, that the legislature passed almost unanimously. So we're to believe that 8 months ago, they were in almost unanimous agreement about the need for this. And now, we've decided to go through and absolutely take a blowtorch to it. Senator Jamie Peterson should be ashamed of himself. I think we've invited him on the show. To talk about it. We haven't heard.
Be ashamed if you're shameless.
We haven't heard back yet.
There's another part of this that I think is insidious. As soon as you throw the word out communist, people go, oh, right-wing nut. But the Communist Party in China, if you look at what they did, the most powerful weapon they had was to separate children from their parents.
Yeah.
And if you can go to children and you create a law that allows the child to essentially threaten the parent, because that's what, if you've got a good relationship, that's not going to happen. Yeah. But if a kid is pissed off their parents, and that happens, anyone with kids knows that today my kids are loving me, giving me hugs, and then tomorrow they might call me a jerk, and then the next day they're going to love me again, because that's part of the whole teenage thing. But you get a child that comes in and they're angry at their parents. All they have to do is threaten that there's something untoward going on, right? Yeah. Abuse, physical or verbal or whatever. And it'll annihilate the parents.
Yeah.
And so it's this cudgel that we put in the hands of kids if they want to use it. You see it in divorce all the time, right? The one parent is really strict and the other's not strict, and so the strict one, the kid says, "Oh, they're abusing me," right?
Yeah.
I know I've got family that's gone through this. The parent that is the parent is a strict one, and the kid doesn't like that. And then you get, then the kid can't spend any time with him.
Yeah, and in here,
with not real physical abuse.
Right, in this state, they give so much credibility to the child when so many of these issues you're looking at, like we went through, I mean, it might have been different in your generation, but you just look at the issues going on in any generation. Like this idea of depression and frustration and this feeling like you don't belong in your own body. This has been happening since the beginning of time. I mean,
Right.
that's why we would do goth when we were a kid. And you'd be like, you'd be goth or whatever it is. It's like, well, now, they're just inundated with this LGBTQ stuff. So now they just feel uncomfortable in their own body. They're going through puberty and all this stuff. And we act as if our state government acts as if this is some completely unique situation that needs to be taken seriously. It's like, no, these are kids and they need their parents, and their parents need to be involved in what's going on. Rick E., is there any leverage to be found in the disparities between all the different ages for different permissions in the state? One age for medical, one age for smoking, one age for dropping out, one age for... This is also interesting to me, is that, I mean, Nicole was pointing it out on the live show this week. They just dropped this bill that says, kids can't have cell phones in school.
Right.
It's like, okay, we don't trust kids with cell phones in class, but we trust them to make life-changing medical decisions.
I find the whole alcohol and cigarettes, right?
And piercings and tattoos.
Yeah.
So you have to have parental consent for those, but not parental consent for certain medical things.
It's what tells you that this is not a scientific based ideology.
Right.
This is an ideology based policy. That there's an agenda at the end, which is to sort of create this division between parents.
Yep.
And because we still say you can't drink until a certain age, and you can't smoke a cigarette until a certain age, right? That just shows that they're not consistent in what their thinking is. And
are they putting an emergency clause onto this?
we had an emergency clause already in it.
Okay, so
Right.
they're not. I just saw Andy in the comments say they're treating this like an emergency. How is this an emergency? But this would this take effect immediately? This bill to change
you mean
it?
this? Oh,
yep.
I don't know. I haven't. That's a good question. I haven't checked that yet.
I haven't seen it. So if that is the case, what they're trying to do is avoid like a referendum, right?
Right.
Just a couple more questions here for you. We've got Brian Heywood. We threw him on. Sorry for the surprise. He was in. We were going to tape an interview on this attack on the Parental Rights Initiative. We thought, let's just throw him on live and take some questions from folks who might have them. Stephanie, so glad we're discussing this. They're changing the language to get rid of the pieces we wanted most. No way they should be able to authorize anything medically for my child without consulting me. Anna B says, I feel like it's government overreach because we already made our voice heard on the parental rights issue. Besides reaching out to legislators, what else can they do? That's what she wants to know.
I think the mass response has, so it's not just your legislators. You have to reach out to them. But I think what has to happen is enough people besides you. So if you can get 5 people and those people can get 5 people, that will begin to be the thing that changes it. There was some legislation a while back that was trying to regulate beauticians. And the beauticians got
God, I remember
mad, right?
this.
And they rose up, and you can go to the Capitol and you can testify. You can find out when the bill, like if there's a vote on it or whatever, you can go there. But I think that right now it's the response. One of the things that's interesting too, though, is if you're not in Jamie Peterson's district,
Senator Jamie Peterson,
Senator
Seattle.
Jamie Peterson, if you're not in his district, the website will not allow you to send him a note that you disapprove of this.
Isn't that
even though he's the Senate leader?
Right, you have to find his individual email, and you can contact his office and stuff.
Right.
But it makes it really easy for you to contact your legislator, but it's a
Yes.
little more difficult to track down information for legislators who aren't your own.
I think if you're the Senate Majority Leader, you should not be blocked from hearing people from the whole state because you're driving the whole agenda.
Well, and the other issue I would say is if they really believe that aspects of the Parental Bill of Rights, the Parental Rights Initiative, violate federal laws around privacy for kids, the avenue to deal with that is through the courts. The avenue, right, is not to go in and just completely cross those sections out of a law that was created by the voters.
Well, to your earlier point, if they said, well, we think that there's some things that are wrong with this and need to be fixed, I would expect 1 or 2 paragraphs that might be out of compliance. But if you start going through this, it's page after page after page.
It is absolutely
of
to death.
deletions. Yeah.
Oh my God, it's insane.
Information about vocational training.
Why would a parent not need to know about information about vocational training?
Records of attendance, including unexcused absences.
Why would a parent not need to know about that? This is insane stuff, what they're doing. And it's anti-democratic, 100%. Anna B says, when will there be a hearing on this bill? Anna, I will check. You don't have a hearing
I just
date
had
off
one.
the top of my...
No, I don't.
No,
I'll find out.
We'll tell you about it on the show when we know. Andy, what's next for Brian to watch for? More initiatives? You running for office? Andy wants to know.
I'm not running for office.
Is that a definitive?
No.
No, yeah, don't. You never say never. I already joked about running an independent bid for governor.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which, if it comes down to it, so I'm hoping that someone else steps in because that would be a real pain in the ass. That would really take away from this whole thing.
Yeah,
you know?
and it's a money depleter. Let me tell you.
I don't have money to be depleted. You have money to deplete on such things.
Not as much anymore. They're trying to take it all.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of things. Like I said, number one is I think leveling the playing field is an important part of what we've got to do. Number two is I'm working on some media ideas that I've been playing around with, right?
Who wants to compete with me?
No, I want to enhance what you're doing. I want more people to be driven to your site, right? I want to create a mechanism so that more people can be better informed more easily. And
that's the information war is the predominant issue here.
It's huge.
It's huge.
Well, there's two things. It's that and the money, right?
We'll keep going on what's next for you, and then we'll talk about that information piece really quick. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, so there's maybe three things right now that I'm focused on, right? One is this sort of leveling the playing field.
Yeah. Number
two is we have a large group of people that sign these initiatives, and we know who they are. Not all of them want to be contacted, but sort of sifting through that and beginning to get a database of like a grassroots army that could be motivated and activated, so that you may find this really you may be passionate about this, but again, you need 400,000 other people to sort of feel the same way and contact the legislature. So I'm going to see what we can do to build out the activist and the grassroots groups. And I need to give them information that's useful and then make it easy for them to interact with the state and get information.
I say we just do what the left does. We dress head to toe in black, a little cosplay ninja situation, and we just light things on fire. They light things on fire and they get their way.
They do.
At what point do we just adopt the tactics of Antifa?
Never.
Okay, Never. Good answer. That was a test. That was a test.
I don't think Antifa is an effective way of doing things. I think that Saul Alinsky was an interesting person who
rules against radicals.
Yeah, and the reason I say it, I don't know that we do everything.
Radicals.
Yeah, it was rules for radicals.
Not against.
Dedicated to Satan, I think was the book was. So I hesitate in recommending this, but his basic. I think we need to understand it. How do you disrupt functioning society, and it's this book of things that you would do to make the other side flounder, and we play by a different set of rules, and if we don't understand the rules they're playing by, we will lose. So for one example is who was the woman, the legislator that leaked the tax?
Senator Noel Frame.
Noel Frame. She used the word villain, right?
Yeah.
Villain is straight out of Saul Alinsky. We fight against the left.
Yeah.
They fight against the villain, the rich hedge fund Brian Heywood.
Yeah.
It's much easier for people to hate the rich hedge fund Brian Heywood than this, the overreaching progressives, right? And so I think it's important to know. So I keep pounding. The microphone's going to hear my hand pounding. It's important to know that it's Jamie Peterson that is supporting and leading this, that Reuven Carlyle wrote the law that Jamie Peterson also co-authored for the CCA, and that they're Jamie Peterson's architectural firm is taking huge amounts of money from the state for the CCA.
Oh, really?
Not for this, for architectural, but $40 million. His architectural firm took in $40 million from groups that are from government, schools and colleges that are retrofitting their schools or their buildings to match the new green environmental rules, right?
Yeah.
Make a rule, requirement. Yeah,
it's all about money.
Oh my gosh,
it's all about money.
So some of what I'm doing too is exposing that. I'm starting to go in, digging through it, and trying to make that stuff more apparent of where it is. And that's the other. I think Twitter X is really this fundamentally interesting experiment now that it's sort of been reset, where information happens there almost before it does anywhere else, right? And it's a great way to quickly communicate with people and start sharing information.
Yeah, I mean, X right now is the platform that most people are watching us on, which you just look at. I mean, compared to the other platforms, I mean, and I have more people on Facebook, but X is significantly better for us. And it's because they're not throttling anything in the way that others do. So I know you have to go soon. We've already went past the time that you had for us. A couple things that I want to ask you about, and then we'll kind of circle back to that information thing. And then I don't know how much money you're worth. It's none of my business, really. But the state of Washington wants it to be their business. I know you have some assets in Japan, for instance. They just introduced the wealth tax. So 1% tax on global assets over $100 million. Do you pick up and I don't know, maybe
I would leave.
You would leave if they passed it. You would leave Washington State. You would pull out anything you do.
Or I would do what I needed to do so I was no longer a resident, right?
And you would expect that most people who have more than $100 million would do that.
Yes.
Yeah. Were you surprised that even Nick Hanauer, progressive Nick Hanauer?
No. In fact, Nick Hanauer, it's exactly what I've been. Bill Gates is all for income taxes. Yeah. He doesn't give a crap what the income tax is because he's so far beyond an income tax, right? Nick Hanauer, he's totally for capital gains tax. He's totally for, aren't I such a good guy? Look at me. I have a halo over my head because I'm for all these taxes, even though I'm a rich guy. Let's talk about wealth tax. Now he sent out like an 8-part post saying that's a dumb idea. Yeah.
You can't do that.
This is one that would hit him, right? So finally a tax that's going to hit him. And he's like, I got mine. I don't mind if we tax the crap out of you while you're trying to get yours because you shouldn't collect up to the size I am. Because as long as I have the money and you don't have as much money as me, I have more influence than you. It's the most hypocritical... And I'm similarly, I'm blocked by him.
I was going to say, are you blocked by Nick Hanauer? Because I am. Can you imagine being that rich and that triggered by a podcaster?
I've never said anything on his. I'm blocked by him as well.
Well, yeah, but your presence is a threat. Yes, your presence.
You speak to thousands of people.
Yeah, but if I had that much money, I wouldn't care what a podcaster said. Yeah. I'm just a girl. I'm just a girl doing a podcast, you know? We're two girls, one podcast. If anybody gets the reference. I hope you don't get the reference because now I'm embarrassed I even used it. On the information, Warren, we'll end there. You know, what's challenging, you mentioned Saul Alinsky, and I don't know the exact quote, but it's sort of like accuse your enemy of doing what you're doing as you do it, right? Right. And they do that. I mean, they accuse the other side of attacking democracy, yet they're out there harassing the signature gatherers. They're trying to use lawfare to undermine the process. It was, the most lie-driven, gaslighting-driven. They're bribing voters with their own money to try to convince them and then accusing the other side of being the bad guy. How do you fight back against tactics like that? I mean, do you have to get in the mud?
Probably a little bit. I mean, really.
I don't see a way around it.
I don't think you can just do patty cake and think you're going to get there. So you've got to hit. You've got to hit. But I think one of the things that was effectively done is if you criticize someone, then you would get criticized for mudslinging. And there's a difference. There's real mudslinging, right? Making false accusations and tawdry things about people's lives. That's one thing. But calling them out like there was a reporter that came after me trying to see if I was invested in oil, right? Yeah. And the idea of the reporter was, well, Brian is self-interested in this, right? And 10 years ago, I had a small investment in a small fund that invested in a Japanese company with oil, and they found it in some public disclosure thing. And, it was small, and it was a long time ago. Mm-hmm. But the insinuation was, oh my gosh, Brian Heywood is self-interested.
It's in the pocket of big oil, right? Or he is the pocket of big oil.
I'm just acting on their behalf, right? But at the same time, there was no curiosity about clean and prosperous, employing Reuven Carlyle and then giving money to the No campaign and then taking 40. There's no, so if I go out and I point that out, well, that's not very classy, right? Right. No, I'm not doing anything rude. I'm just, and I'm very careful, even with like Senator Peterson. I'm not saying he's doing anything illegal. Yeah. I'm just saying his firm is taking $40 million from the state. Right. At the same time he's preaching that we're out of money and we got to do all these new taxes.
Yeah.
Well, maybe if your firm didn't take $40 million from the state, that might help, right? How about if we start there, right?
Well, and this is like journalism 101. It's like you're looking into, if you have a program and you have politicians who are doing everything they can to prop that program up, to lie about that program, whatever it is, and then they're benefiting from it financially, that's journalism 101. Like, that's a story by any journalistic standard. Yet they completely bury it. So I really believe that no matter what I do, no matter what you do, no matter what anything, what happens, if we don't level the information playing field a little bit, we won't get anywhere in this state. The politics of this state won't improve. The policy of this state won't improve, because we forget sometimes that I would say 95% of people are passive consumers of news and information in this state. And so they don't know, all they know is what they see in little glimpses here and there. And we know how dishonest so much of the media that's being put out there. So if we don't level the playing field, I mean, we're trying our best, but we're only one podcast. If we don't level the playing field, there's no hope. To me, that's just fundamentally what's going on. So Brian Heywood, thank you for hopping on a live stream with us. Sorry for surprising you guys with it, but what a nice surprise in the middle of the week. We are going to be all over this. So lawmakers already trying to unravel the parental rights initiative that 500,000 people nearly signed, that they passed into law less than a year ago. They now want to upend it, saying you don't have a right as a parent to know what's happening with medical decision with your kids at school, mental health issues with your kids at school. So Senate Bill 5181 is the bill that they have put forth, which is just taking an absolute butcher's knife to the Parental Rights Act. So contact your lawmaker, tell them that this is an affront to the democratic process. It's a middle finger to voters. Please word those emails nicely.
And then the parents. It's
and
really,
parents.
This is rude and disrespectful and untrusting of the most fundamentally important institution in our society, which is the family, and parents doing their darndest every day to raise kids in an appropriate way. Yeah,
and I think letting them know that in those emails and those comments, and if there's an opportunity to speak at a hearing for Senate Bill 5181, hey, I can parent my kids. I can help my kids through a difficult situation they're dealing with at school or with gender dysphoria. I don't need the government to hide it from me. I don't need the government to do it for me. So Brian Heywood, thank you for being here. We'll be in the fight with you. If you have not signed up to support Undivided already, you can do that for just $5 a month, undividedpod.com. Undividedpod.com. We'll be back tomorrow with our regular live show at noon. This was just a special bonus live because Brian Heywood was in the house. How nice is that? We'll see you guys tomorrow.